My name's Kate Davis and I'm a lecturer and the course coordinator for the Library and Information Studies major in the Master of Information Technology. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to be a productivity ninja. And while I don't think I am necessarily one, I do have some tips for you about how you can use web-based services and apps, as well as other basic software that you have at your disposal to organise your life. I've got a series of tips for you, which are based on my personal practices around productivity. My first tip is to read a book, which kind of sounds like wasting time rather than using time effectively. The book I recommend you read is called Getting Things Done. In Australia, it's sometimes called How to Get Things Done. This book was written by David Allen, and you might have heard this system referred to as GTD. It's a really popular productivity system that's often used by people in business and IT circles. GTD is a productivity system based around how you organise information. The book is a really easy read and I highly recommend it. It has some basic principles that you can pick up and apply without necessarily applying the whole system. And it can actually take some time to work through the whole system and get yourself set up. What I tend to do is use a modified GTD approach with some of my favourite elements from the system, which you'll see in this video. From time to time, when I think that my workload is going a bit crazy, I'll dip back into the book and see which parts of the system I could possibly re-implement in order to make things a bit easier to manage. My second tip is tame your inbox. And this is really based on the principles that are in the GTD system. GTD advocates inbox zero, which means having no email at all in your inbox at any time. The argument is your inbox is a holding place where you put information until you're able to sort it into its correct home. Many of us use our inboxes as to-do lists, and I know I'm a bit guilty of this too. I try to keep my inbox below about 20 items at any one time. And I do this by using a series of folders that David Allen talks about in the GTD book. I have 4 main folders in my inbox. The first is an archive, where I throw anything that I might need at some point in the future. The next is my next action folder, and this is where I file emails as they come in. If I can't answer an email in 2 minutes, then I dump it straight into the next actions folder, and when I get to the end of the day and I have time to look at my email, I will then work through the items in the next actions folder until they're all done. I also have a someday maybe folder, which is where I store ideas for projects or things that I can't fit into my workload at the moment, but might want to revisit later. The fourth folder is a waiting for folder, and this is probably the really critical one in my workflow. I use the waiting for folder to keep a track of any email that I send that I'm waiting for action or a response on. The way this works is I add myself as a CC on the email, and then I go down to the bottom of the email and I type @WF, and then I have a rule that automatically takes any emails that are CC'd to me and have this little bit of text and puts them straight in my @waiting_for folder when I hit send. Then once a week I go through my waiting for folder and check to make sure that everything I've been waiting for action on has been actioned, and I follow up on the things that need follow-up. So those are the main folders that I use to manage my email. But really the most important thing is to get stuff out of your inbox and into your folders. You might also like to get stuff out of your inbox and into a to-do list, which is fine as well. I kind of run a hybrid system of to-dos where I have email to-dos separately from others. The David Allen system advocates putting everything in together. My third tip is that you move to the cloud. The real linchpin in my cloud-based system of information management is Dropbox. I use Dropbox to organize all of my files so that I can access them across my devices, on either of my 2 laptops, on my iPad mini, on my phone. All of my material is available no matter which device I have in my hand. In the past, I have wasted lots of time losing USBs or leaving USBs at home, or even just having a half-baked implementation of Dropbox, where I had some folders on Dropbox and some on my computer. Over time, I've learnt that if I use Dropbox for all of my files, then I have access in meetings, I can work on documents while I'm waiting for people, I can work on documents on the train. Dropbox works best when it's installed on your computer, so that it is just like any other drive that you have on your computer. There is a web interface for Dropbox, which makes it useful for me when I'm going to teach something, because I can pop my file wherever it needs to go in Dropbox, and then I can log into the web interface on the PC I'm presenting from and get the file. You'll notice when you look at my Dropbox on the screen now that it's pretty highly organized. The apps folder is linked to iPad apps, things like a voice recorder, so that when I am voice recording on my iPad, it automatically saves to my Dropbox. In my work folder, you'll see that I have a pretty crazy filing system, and you'll notice there are a few files out of place, but there are only about 5 of them. So I'm pretty full on about keeping my filing system organized. If I don't organize everything like this, it becomes difficult to find what I need because I've got all my files in here, so there's a lot to search through. So in each broad grouping in my Dropbox work folder, I also have other folders below that. So I've got quite a complex directory of file structures, but I know exactly where to go to retrieve the documents I need. My 4th tip is to keep a running to-do list. I tend to move backwards and forwards between methods of managing my to-do list. One of my favourite ways to manage my to-do list is using an app called Asana. Asana is like a personal to-do list manager on steroids. It allows you to break up your to-dos into different projects. You can share your to-dos with other people so that you can create project spaces for teams in a workplace. There's space to have notes and to break tasks down into subtasks and to assign tasks to other people in your team. The really great thing about Asana is you can forward to-dos directly into Asana from your email inbox. And I find this is a really useful way to manage the to-dos that arise out of my email on a daily basis. All I do is edit the subject line so that it is written like a to-do, and all the correspondence goes with that into the to-do item in Asana. I mentioned that I go backwards and forwards with different methods for managing my to-do list. At the moment, I'm using a paper-based list. So I carry around a moleskin notebook in my handbag and I write things down as they occur to me just in one big running list. I tend to revert to a paper-based to-do list when I've got a lot on and I need to be able to visually see what's happening in front of me on my desk in order to keep all the wheels in motion. Tip number 5 is to write everything down in one searchable place. I am a big fan of Evernote. Evernote is like my brain in an app. Anything that I'm thinking about, any meeting that I'm in, anything that I might need to remember at some point in the future, I put straight into Evernote. I've got a complex system of notebooks in Evernote where I have information filed, but I have a very bad habit of putting all of my notes into one notebook that's called To Sort and File. And one day I may get around to sorting and filing these things. I don't use Evernote to its fullest potential. Evernote actually allows you to tag resources so you can add metadata to your notes. I don't do that because the Evernote search is brilliant and you don't need to add tags in order to retrieve information quickly. So I find if I'm making myself tag all my notes, I tend not to write things down because I can't be bothered thinking about the tags. But if I just dump it somewhere in Evernote, I can always get back to it later. So some of the things that I'll put in here are little bits of code when I'm making websites. I've got a list of things I need to raise with someone else in the team. I've got some notes for a project and how we're going to undertake the project. I've got links for images that I've used in presentations so that when I come to do the image credits, I've got those there. Evernote, along with Dropbox, is probably the core of my information management system, and it's great because just like Dropbox, I can access it on all of my devices. My 6th tip is to do things once but use them many times. And there are a variety of ways that I do this. Let me show you a couple of examples. On screen here you can see a Google Calendar. At the beginning of every semester, I have to put appointments in my diary to remind me to prepare for and go to class, and also to remind me when my students' assignments are going to be coming in. A few years ago, I decided that it was crazy for me to not share this with my students because I'm spending all the time putting the information in and they may as well get the benefit out of it too. So instead of putting the appointments into my Outlook calendar, I put them into my Google Calendar, and then I embed that calendar into my course sites for my students. I also import the calendar into my own Outlook diary. So I get the appointments that I need, and my students can take advantage of them too. Here's another example. On Pinterest, I have a board called Fancy Fonts, and here I bookmark any images that contain fonts that I might like to use in a presentation. I only bookmark things that have got fonts that I like, so I'm not scrolling through a big, huge list of fonts every time, but these are fonts that I've thought, okay, I might use that one day, filed away, and I can quickly and easily install and use them when I'm making a presentation. I do the same thing with images around particular topics on Pinterest, and I have another little system that I use on Flickr where I star or favorite images so that I can get back to them quickly when I need to create a reference list. So my workflow is that I download the image, insert it into a presentation, star it on Flickr, and then at the very end I can go back to my favorites, find all the images I've used, and create a reference list. Not only does this make it easier to compile a reference list, but I'm also building up a bank of images that I like that I can use in other presentations in the future. Finally, my 7th tip is to automate. I have a few different systems in place for this. There are lots of different ways you can automate things. Some apps will connect to others to allow you to streamline processes. For those apps that don't have this inbuilt, there is a great service called If This Then That, ifttt.com. I use If This Then That for a couple of things. The main way I use it is to send links that I tweet to Delicious. So any tweet that I favorite that has a link in it gets automatically sent to Delicious and bookmarked as a public bookmark. So this is a really easy way for me to bookmark things that I see on Twitter without actually having to do much at all. I also have another rule set up to forward notifications from a Google Plus community from my Gmail into my QUT email account. So that's it. Those are my 7 tips for becoming a productivity ninja. But what I realized as I made this video is that I probably could have boiled it down to just one tip. And that tip is be a good librarian. You'll notice that all of my productivity tricks and tips are basically about managing information. Where I store things, how I store things, how things get from one place to another. I think if we apply our information management skills to organising our lives, then we can be more productive, more efficient, and get things done really easily. The most important thing is to use systems, apps, software that work for you. Don't be afraid to try out new tools and new services and see how they can fit into your workflow. But more importantly, don't be afraid to discard those services and tools if they're not working for you. If you've got any tips on productivity, whether it's about apps or systems or tools, please add them in the comments section. I'd be really interested to hear about them.